Layla surfaced slowly, drifting back into consciousness as though from deep water. The room was unfamiliar. Too quiet, too still, but warmth surrounded her, steady and grounding. For a brief moment, she couldn't remember why her chest felt hollow, why her heart felt bruised. Then it came back to her in fragments. Dim lights, low music, a stranger's calm voice, hands, sure, unhurried, anchoring her when everything inside her had felt like it was falling apart. She lay still, staring at the ceiling, her body heavy in that peculiar way that came after intensity had burned itself out. Whatever had happened between them the night before hadn't been gentle, but it hadn't been careless either. It had been consuming, two strangers colliding in a moment where names, histories, and consequences didn't exist. She remembered the way she had gone quiet beneath him, not out of shyness but emptiness. How she had let herself drift, let sensation replace thought. How, for a brief, dangerous stretch of time, she hadn't felt betrayed or humiliated or broken, just present. Beside her, he lay awake. Lucas watched her without moving, his breathing even, his expression unreadable. He had memorized the lines of her face in the low light hours ago, the faint crease between her brows even in sleep, the way her lashes rested against her cheeks, the vulnerability she never allowed the world to see. She hadn't known who he was. She still didn't, and that was exactly how he had wanted it. There had been a moment, at the height of it, when something raw and unguarded had passed between them, when control and restraint had slipped just enough for truth to bleed through. He had felt it then. The unmistakable pull, the same one that had haunted him for years. Only now it was sharpened by power, by patience, by the knowledge of everything she had lost and everything he had become. Layla shifted, pulling the sheet closer as awareness fully settled in. Her body ached faintly, not unpleasantly, but she felt detached from it, like it belonged to someone else. She sat up without looking at him. "I should go," she said quietly, her voice flat, emotion carefully sealed away. He didn't stop her, didn't ask her to stay. He had learned long ago that restraint was far more powerful than possession. "Take your time," he replied, his tone calm, controlled. She dressed quickly, movements efficient, almost mechanical. No searching glances, no awkward smiles, no attempt to make meaning out of what they had shared. Whatever it had been, she had needed it to be temporary, something that existed only in the dark. At the door, she hesitated for half a second, her hand resting on the handle. She didn't turn around. "Goodbye," she said. The door closed softly behind her. Lucas remained where he was, eyes fixed on the empty space she had left behind. He listened to her footsteps fade, to the elevator chime in the distance, to the silence that followed. She had walked out of his life once without knowing what she was leaving behind. This time, she walked away without knowing who he truly was. A slow, deliberate breath left him as he finally moved, standing and walking to the window. Below, the city stretched out, alive, ruthless, full of opportunity. He watched until he was certain she was gone. Then, quietly, with no trace of the boy she had once rejected left behind, Lucas allowed himself a single, undeniable truth. This was only the beginning. Morning settled over the city with quiet indifference. Layla walked the sidewalk without looking back, the cool air brushing against her skin, as if trying to wake her from a dream she didn't want to name. The night clung to her in fragments. Heat, closeness, the strange safety of silence. She didn't regret it. Regret required emotion, and right now she felt hollow in a way that made everything easier. One night, one stranger, no name. That was the rule she clung to as she disappeared into the waking city. High above the streets she now blended into, Lucas remained still. The room had already been reset. Sheets changed, curtains drawn back, every trace of chaos neatly erased. Control had always been his instinct, his armor. What lingered wasn't disorder but memory. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets, gaze sharp and distant. Below, traffic moved in disciplined streams. People hurried to meetings, deadlines, power plays. His world, A phone vibrated on the table behind him. "Sir." His assistant's voice came through the line, crisp and deferential. "The board is assembled. The Singapore acquisition is ready for final approval." Lucas didn't turn. "Delay it by 30 minutes. A pause. "Understood." He ended the call and finally allowed himself to breathe. Years ago, he had been invisible. Now, the world bent quietly in his direction. Lucas Beltran, founder and CEO of Beltran Global Holdings. Tech, logistics, real estate, private equity. His name carried weight in rooms Layla had never been allowed into, rooms where decisions shifted markets and erased competitors without raised voices or wasted motion. The boy who once waited in hallways, measuring his worth against people who never saw him, no longer existed. What remained was precision, influence, distance, and patience. He turned from the window, his reflection staring back at him. Tailored restraint wrapped around something far colder than ambition. Emotional detachment had been learned the hard way. Trust was a liability. Desire was a weakness he kept tightly leashed. Except last night it had slipped. Not because he'd lost control, but because he had chosen to. He knew exactly who Layla Harrison was. Had known the moment he saw her walk into the bar with heartbreak etched into her posture. He had seen the fracture beneath her beauty, the exhaustion beneath her pride. She hadn't recognized him. That too was power. Lucas picked up his phone again, scrolling briefly through a private dossier already memorized. Harrison estate disputes, internal board conflicts, questionable financial movements flagged months ago. Her father's name appeared more than once. A slow, unreadable smile touched his mouth, gone as quickly as it came. Last night hadn't been an accident. It hadn't been nostalgia. And it certainly hadn't been closure. It was timing. Lucas slipped on his watch, straightened his cufflinks, and stepped back into the role the world expected of him. The CEO, the strategist, the man no one crossed twice. Somewhere in the city, Layla was telling herself the night meant nothing. He intended to keep it that way, for now, because when he finally stepped back into her life, when she learned who he truly was, it wouldn't be as a stranger she left behind. It would be as a force she could no longer ignore. The city didn't slow down for heartbreak. Layla learned that quickly. 2 weeks after the night she refused to name, she stood inside a brightly lit design studio, fabric swatches draped over her arm, a measuring tape looped around her neck. The air smelled of steam, fresh cloth, and ambition. It wasn't glamorous. Not yet, but it was honest work, and for the first time in a long while that mattered more to her than comfort. "Layla, can you adjust the hem on this one?" Her supervisor, Renee, called from across the room. "The client wants something cleaner. Less drama." Layla nodded. "On it." She crouched beside the mannequin, fingers steady as she pinned the fabric. This wasn't the life she had imagined growing up in a mansion with marble floors and endless security, but it was one she was choosing. Every sketch she refined, every late night she endured, felt like a quiet rebellion against the chaos that had once defined her. During lunch breaks, while others chatted about weekend plans, Layla sat with her notebook open, sketching designs that belonged only to her. Clean lines, bold silhouettes, pieces that told stories of resilience without saying a word. "You're always working," a coworker teased one afternoon. "When do you breathe?" Layla smiled faintly. "When I'm done building something that's mine." At night, she tracked every expense, every paycheck. She moved into a modest apartment, refused help from her father, and ignored the texts he sent pretending concern. Independence wasn't loud. It was disciplined, intentional, earned, and she was starving for it. Across the city, and sometimes across continents, Lucas Beltran moved through a very different world. A boardroom in glass and steel fell silent the moment he took his seat. "The numbers don't lie," one executive said carefully. "If we push this expansion now, we dominate the market before Q4. Lucas steepled his fingers, his expression unreadable. "Dominate isn't enough," he replied calmly. "I want leverage. We wait, then acquire." A murmur rippled through the room. "With respect, sir," another voice ventured, That delays profit. Lucas's gaze lifted slowly, sharp and cool. No, it delays exposure. There's a difference. Silence followed. Proceed with my plan, he added. And inform legal I want a deeper audit on all new partners. No exceptions. Yes, Mr. Beltran. Several voices answered at once. Influence followed him effortlessly now. Governments listened. Competitors adjusted. His company didn't just grow, it absorbed, reshaped, redefined industries. Yet even surrounded by power, Lucas remained distant. He didn't celebrate wins, didn't linger at events, didn't indulge. Late one evening, his assistant hesitated outside his office. Sir, you've been working nonstop. The gala tonight. Cancel my appearance, Lucas said without looking up. She paused. May I ask why? His pen stilled for just a second. Because, he said evenly, I have priorities. She nodded and left. Lucas leaned back, eyes drifting to the city beyond the window. Somewhere down there, Layla was building herself from the ground up, unaware that every step she took was being quietly observed. Not out of obsession, but alignment. Two lives moving forward. Two paths sharpening with intent. Separate, but no longer by chance. Neither of them knew it yet, but the distance between them wasn't growing. It was narrowing. The soft hum of sewing machines filled Layla's studio, accompanied by the sharp scent of fresh fabric and the faint tang of coffee. She surveyed the bustling space, pride and exhaustion warring in equal measure. Her own brand, Lumiere, was no longer a dream scribbled in a notebook. It was alive, stitched into every seam, every bold cut, every vision she refused to compromise. Layla, the samples for the autumn line are ready. Her assistant, Mia, called, holding a stack of carefully wrapped fabric. Perfect, Layla replied, her hands already smoothing the top piece. She didn't look up, her focus never wavered. Arrange them by color palette. I want the first mock-ups on my desk by morning. Mia hesitated, admiration clear in her eyes. You really didn't ask your father for funding? Layla's lips pressed into a line. I'll never rely on him. Not after everything. Her refusal to accept help from Andrew Harrison had cost her time, money, and comfort, but it had forged something far more important. Independence. Every late night, every skipped weekend, every painstaking decision had built her brand with her own hands and mind. A month later, Lumiere's first runway show debuted in a boutique downtown, the models moving with confidence as the lights caught every line Layla had dreamed into existence. She stood off stage, heart steady, knowing that every applause, every flash of cameras, belonged to her alone. Meanwhile, across town, a far more sinister storm was quietly brewing. Lucas's private investigator had been digging into the Harrison estate as part of a discreet audit, and the reports were troubling. Sir, you need to see this, his assistant said, sliding a file across his desk. Lucas raised an eyebrow, taking the folder without breaking his composure. Inside were documents and financial records revealing something Layla didn't yet know. Her father, Andrew Harrison, had been siphoning profits from her inheritance. Transfers labeled as maintenance and operational fees. The board meeting that followed was no longer procedural, it was deliberate. Lucas remained seated toward the back, silent, watchful. Though he had only recently become a shareholder, his presence weighed heavily in the room. Everyone knew who he was. More importantly, they knew what he owned, what he controlled, and what aligning with him could mean. One of the senior board members rose and placed a thick folder at the center of the table. Mr. Andrew Harrison, he said calmly, this investigation has been ongoing for months. Independent auditors have confirmed repeated transfers from company funds into private and offshore accounts under your control. The screen behind him lit up. Transaction trails, forged approvals, shell companies, funds siphoned quietly over the years, including money taken from accounts legally reserved for Andrew's daughter. A stunned silence followed. Andrew laughed nervously. You're misinterpreting internal reallocations. Family holdings can be, not falsified signatures. Another board member interrupted, switching slides. Not concealed accounts. And certainly not funds rerouted without board authorization. Andrew's face drained of color. The evidence is conclusive, the first board member continued. This constitutes financial fraud, abuse of office, and embezzlement. Security moved in before Andrew could stand. The vote came next, swift and unanimous. Andrew Harrison was removed immediately. In accordance with the company charter, a board member announced, the chair position will be held temporarily until Mr. Harrison's daughter formally assumes her rightful role. There was no hesitation when the nomination followed. Lucas. Every hand went up. It was political, strategic, and inevitable. Currying favor with Lucas was the logical choice. His influence, wealth, and business empire already far exceeded anyone else in the room. Lucas rose slowly. I accept the position of acting chairman, he said evenly. Behind him, Andrew was restrained as security held him in place until authorities arrived. He was arrested on the spot. Before the meeting adjourned, one final statement was entered into record. All of Andrew's accounts, along with those of his wife and the daughter he had with Susan, were frozen pending prosecution. The board didn't look back. Andrew's reign ended there, exposed, dismantled, and stripped of power in a single afternoon. Outside the boardroom, Lucas allowed himself the faintest exhale. Layla had built her empire with integrity. Her father had tried to rob her of that legacy. And now he intended to see it restored, carefully, strategically, and without ever revealing his hand too early. Meanwhile, Layla continued to pour herself into Lumiere, unaware of the web of deception tightening around her inheritance. Every piece she designed, every choice she made, was a step toward her independence, and unknowingly toward reclaiming everything that had been stolen from her. Her world was expanding, her power was growing, and the storm her father had sown was only beginning to unravel. The conference room at Lumiere was bathed in soft afternoon light, glass walls reflecting the quiet confidence Layla had worked so hard to build. She stood at the head of the table, tablet in hand, skimming through the final figures one last time. Not because she doubted them, but because discipline had become her second skin. Your largest outside investor is here, Mia said, peeking in, barely able to hide her excitement. Lucas Beltran. Layla nodded. She'd reviewed the proposal twice already. Strategic, clean, generous without being controlling. Whoever Lucas Beltran was, he understood business and, more importantly, he had respected her boundaries. No interference, no pressure, just capital and confidence. Send him in, Layla said calmly. The door opened, and for half a second the world tilted. Lucas stepped inside, tailored suit fitting him with effortless precision. Presence quiet but commanding. He didn't rush, didn't perform. He simply looked at her, and something unspoken passed between them. Layla's breath caught before she could stop it. It was ridiculous. She'd met dozens of investors, men with money and ego spilling from their pockets. But this was different. There was a pull she couldn't explain, a familiarity that made her chest tighten, even as her mind searched for reason. Ms. Harrison, Lucas said, extending a hand. His voice was smooth, controlled. It's good to finally meet you in person. She took his hand, the contact brief but electric. Likewise, she replied, hoping her composure hid the sudden awareness humming under her skin. Thank you for believing in Lumiere. I don't invest in ideas, he said, releasing her hand. I invest in people who execute. Something in his gaze lingered, measuring, but not in the way Brian used to. This wasn't ownership. It was recognition. They took their seats, lawyers and assistants exchanging polite murmurs as documents were slid across the table. As Layla signed, Lucas spoke casually, almost too casually. Your senior year collection. Was that the one inspired by architectural minimalism? Her pen paused mid-stroke. She looked up. You know about that? He shrugged lightly. Hard to forget. You had a way of standing out even then. Her brow furrowed. Have we met before? A corner of his mouth lifted, just slightly. Same high school. Different worlds. Her heart skipped. Wait! You went to Harrison Prep, he finished for her. Yes. She leaned back slowly, studying him with new eyes. The familiarity sharpened, snapping into focus. Why don't I remember you? Lucas didn't look offended. If anything, he'd expected the question. Because you didn't notice people like me back then. The room seemed to quiet, the legal team momentarily forgotten. He continued, voice steady. I asked you to prom. Her breath hitched. What? You laughed, he said calmly. Then you told me you already had a boyfriend, and that you deserved better. Heat rushed to her face. Memory surged, blurred, distant, ugly in hindsight. Lucas, she started, mortified. I was planning to apologize. I really was. I know, he said gently, cutting her off. You tried. Brian stopped you. Her lips parted. You saw that. Yes. Silence stretched, thick with old wounds and unspoken truths. I was young, Layla said quietly. Angry. I didn't know how cruel I sounded. Lucas met her gaze, something unreadable passing through his eyes. It doesn't matter anymore. The way he said it made her unsure whether it truly didn't, or whether he'd simply learned how to carry it. The papers were signed. Hands were shaken. The meeting officially ended. As the others filed out, Layla remained seated, watching Lucas gather his things. So, she said, breaking the silence, this investment, it's not just business, is it? He turned to her, that same calm intensity settling between them. Everything is business, Layla. Some of it just happens to be personal. Her pulse quickened. And your help, what does it cost me? He stepped closer, not invading her space, but close enough that she felt the air shift. Nothing you're not already willing to give yourself, he said. I'm not here to save you. That sounds familiar, she murmured. A faint smile touched his lips. I meant it then. I mean it now. As they walked out together, side by side, the tension between them deepened, no longer rooted in mystery alone, but in history, in timing, in things almost said and never finished. Layla didn't know what to make of Lucas Beltran yet. But one thing was certain. This reunion wasn't accidental. And whatever he was planning, it was already changing everything. The first sign that something was wrong came in the form of a phone call Layla hadn't expected, and hadn't received in years. Layla, her father said, his voice too careful, too rehearsed. We need to talk. She stood in her office long after business hours, city lights glowing beyond the glass. Lucas sat across from her, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, watching her face as she listened. About what? Layla asked coolly. There was a pause. About the board. Some discrepancies have come up. Layla's gaze flicked to Lucas. He gave the smallest nod. I'm busy, she replied. If it's important, put it in writing. She ended the call before he could respond. Her hands trembled just slightly. Lucas stood. You okay? She exhaled. I thought I was past letting him affect me. You are, Lucas said. That doesn't mean the past is done with you. She crossed her arms. So this is it? Your help. He didn't deny it. I told you I wouldn't save you, but I will stand beside you. He slid a folder across the desk. Your mother's trust, he said. It was never dissolved. Your father amended reports to the board, claimed operational losses, and quietly rerouted dividends into shell accounts. Layla stared at the documents, jaw tightening. He stole from me. Yes. And Susan knew. Lucas's silence was answer enough. What about Kate? Layla asked. She benefited, he said calmly. Luxury tuition, overseas shopping sprees, a lifestyle funded by money that was never meant for them. Layla closed her eyes. The anger that rose wasn't explosive, it was cold, precise. I don't want revenge, she said softly. Lucas met her gaze. Good. This isn't revenge. What is it, then? Correction. The board meeting was scheduled for Monday morning. Layla walked into the glass-walled room in a tailored ivory suit, head held high. Lucas followed, not beside her but slightly behind, strategic, intentional. The room went still. Her father's face drained of color. "Layla," he said, forcing a smile. "This is unexpected." "So was learning my inheritance was financing your second family," she replied evenly. Susan stiffened. Kate's manicured fingers tightened around her tablet. The board chair cleared his throat. "Ms. Harrison, perhaps you'd like to explain why you requested this emergency session." Layla nodded. "I'd like to present an audit, one independently conducted over the last 6 months. She gestured to Lucas. "He represents the firm that assisted," she said, "and one of your largest external stakeholders." Murmurs rippled through the room. Lucas spoke only once, voice calm, devastating in its clarity. "The funds diverted total 7 figures. Tracked, documented, verifiable." Layla's father stood abruptly. "This is a misunderstanding." "No," Layla said quietly. "This is theft." Silence followed. By the end of the meeting, everything had changed. Her father was removed pending investigation. Susan's credit cards were frozen by afternoon. Kate's private school sent a polite but firm email before sunset. The house on the hill went dark within weeks. No staff, no luxury cars, no lavish brunches or designer deliveries. Layla didn't visit. She didn't need to. Her inheritance was restored, legally, cleanly, irrevocably. Lumiere's expansion followed shortly after. That night, Layla stood on her balcony, the city alive beneath her. Lucas joined her, handing her a glass of wine. "You did this," she said quietly. He shook his head. "You reclaimed what was already yours." She turned to him. "You could have destroyed them." "I know," he said. "That wouldn't have healed you." She studied his face, the man who had once been invisible to her, and was now impossible to ignore. "So what now?" she asked. Lucas met her gaze, something deeper surfacing at last. "Now you live free." The words settled into her chest, warm and steady. And for the first time, Layla realized this wasn't revenge. It was justice. And it was only the beginning. Layla should have known peace wouldn't last long. The call came on a quiet afternoon while she was reviewing fabric samples in her studio. "Layla," Brian's voice said, soft, almost careful. "It's me." Her hands stilled. She hadn't heard that voice in months, yet it slid back into her memory with uncomfortable ease. Promises, excuses, the way he always spoke when he wanted something. "I don't think we have anything to talk about," she said calmly. "Please," he pressed. "Just 5 minutes. I owe you an apology." She hesitated, then sighed. 5. That's it. They met at a cafe near her office, public, neutral. Brian arrived early, dressed better than she remembered, hair neatly cut, nerves written all over him. "You look good," he said when she sat down. "So do you," she replied politely, though there was no warmth behind it. "I heard about everything," Brian began. "Your father, the board, the brand. You've done incredibly well." Layla studied him. "You didn't call to congratulate me." He swallowed. "I messed up, Layla. I was young. I was stupid. Yet pride and pressure get in the way of us." She leaned back. "You cheated." "I know," he said quickly. "And I hate myself for it. Seeing you now, standing on your own, it made me realize what I lost." Silence stretched between them. "I loved you," Brian said softly. "I still do." Layla felt no rush of emotion, no anger, no longing. Just clarity. "You loved the version of me that needed you," she said. "That girl doesn't exist anymore." Brian frowned. "People change." "Yes," she agreed. "They do." The door of the cafe opened, and Layla didn't need to turn to know who had entered. She had called him earlier to tell him about the meeting. She wanted to get Brian out of her life for good and to not have any hope of them ever reconciling. So she decided that Lucas is the perfect person to help her make sure of that. Lucas's presence was unmistakable, quiet, commanding. He walked over, placing a hand lightly on the back of Layla's chair. "Am I interrupting?" he asked calmly. Brian looked up and froze. Recognition hit him slowly, then all at once. You're... Brian stood halfway, then sat back down. Lucas Beltran? Lucas inclined his head slightly. That's right. Brian's face drained of color. The Lucas Beltran? Beltran Global. One of them, Lucas replied evenly. Layla glanced between them. You know each other? Brian let out a shaky laugh. Not personally, but everyone knows him. He looked back at Layla, disbelief flickering in his eyes. You're with him. Lucas didn't answer. He didn't need to. Brian exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I didn't realize. What? Layla asked quietly. That I'd move on? Or that I'd move up? Brian winced. I never stood a chance, did I? He said, more to himself than to them. Lucas finally spoke, his voice firm but not cruel. This isn't a competition. Brian nodded slowly, humiliation settling in. Right? Of course. He turned to Layla, eyes sincere at last. I really am sorry. For everything. She believed him, but it didn't change anything. I forgive you, she said. But forgiveness doesn't mean access. Brian stood, pushing his chair back. Take care of her, he said to Lucas. Lucas met his gaze. Brian managed a small smile, then walked away without looking back. Layla released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. You didn't have to come, but you did. Thank you so much for that. I owe you one, she said to Lucas. I wanted to, he replied. Some doors should stay closed. I didn't come just because you called, Lucas said quietly. I wanted to. Layla looked at him, surprised by the honesty in his tone. I couldn't imagine you ever going back to Brian after what he did to you. You mentioned earlier that I owed you one, he continued, his gaze steady. I want us to give us a chance. She inhaled slowly, her heart tightening. There's something else, he added, hesitating for the first time. Something I should confess. Her brows knit together. What is it? That night, Lucas said. At the bar. The one before the contract signing. The private booth. The way you laughed like you didn't care about the world. Layla froze. You were really drunk, he said gently. I didn't tell you who I was because I didn't want you to think I took advantage or that I planned it. I just wanted you happy, even if it was only for one night. Her breath caught. Wait, she whispered. That was you. He nodded. It was. For a moment, she said nothing. Then she laughed softly, relief washing over her face. I haven't stopped thinking about that night, she admitted. Finding out it was him made her feel lighter, safer. She couldn't hide her smile at the memory. Lucas searched her expression. I like you, Layla. I always have. And I wanted you to choose me. Clear-minded, certain. She stepped closer. Then I will. His eyes softened. I want to try, she said. With you. Properly. Then slowly, she leaned in for a kiss, and they shared it. Slow, deliberate, full of promise. And for the first time, what stood between them wasn't uncertainty. It was possibility. She looked up at him, something soft and steady unfolding in her chest. For the first time, the past truly felt behind her. And this time, it stayed there. The night was quiet in a way Layla had never known before. She stood alone in her studio, the last light on, surrounded by finished pieces waiting to be shipped for her upcoming showcase. Every stitch, every seam, every risk she had taken lived in the room with her. Success no longer felt unreal, it felt earned. Lucas watched from the doorway, careful not to intrude. You always work this late? He asked gently. Layla smiled without turning. Only when my mind is louder than the world. He stepped inside. And tonight, she exhaled, setting the garment in her hands down. Tonight, I finally hear everything I've been avoiding. She turned to face him, her expression open in a way it rarely was. I spent years believing I wasn't enough, she said. That if I had been better, prettier, quieter, easier, my mother wouldn't have died trying to hold our family together. My father wouldn't have replaced her so easily. Brian wouldn't have looked elsewhere. Lucas didn't interrupt. I blamed myself for being abandoned, she continued. And when things fell apart, I thought I deserved it. Her voice wavered, but she didn't stop. Lucas moved closer, not to touch her, just to be there. You didn't lose them because you were lacking, he said quietly. You lost them because they were weak. She met his gaze. Brian always promised things he couldn't keep. He needed to be needed. And I don't, Lucas said. That made her pause. I don't need you to shrink, he continued. I don't need you to depend on me. I want you exactly as you are. Sharp, ambitious, uncompromising. Layla swallowed. What if I don't always have it together? Then I'll stand beside you, he said. Not ahead of you, not above you. She searched his face, looking for the cracks she had learned to expect. There were none. I didn't come back into your life to fix you, Lucas added. I came back because even back then you were already powerful. You just didn't know it yet. Tears burned her eyes. Not from pain, but from release. I don't want to be saved, Layla said. Lucas smiled, soft but certain. Good. I don't want to save you. She stepped forward then, closing the space between them. I choose you, she said. Not because I need you, but because I want you. Lucas reached for her hand, this time not holding back. Then choose me knowing I'll never compete with your success. I'll protect it, respect it, celebrate it. She intertwined her fingers with his. The showcase weeks later was everything Layla had dreamed of. Her designs drew praise. Orders flooded in. Investors watched her with respect instead of skepticism. And when she stepped onto the stage, applause filling the room, she no longer felt like a girl surviving betrayal. She felt like a woman who had reclaimed her name. Her inheritance was restored. Her company was thriving. Her past no longer dictated her worth. Lucas stood at the edge of the room, eyes on her. Not possessive, not controlling. Proud. Later, as the crowd thinned, Layla found him. You never tried to take over, she said softly. He smiled. Because this was never about revenge. No, she agreed. It was about choice. He reached for her hand again, this time in front of everyone. Their story didn't end in vengeance. It began in love that was chosen, not forced. And for the first time in her life, Layla wasn't walking beside someone who dimmed her light. She was walking with someone who let her shine. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your thoughts mean a lot to me. And trust me, the next story will be even better. You won't want to miss it. Turn on the notification bell so you're the first to know.